Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Eileen Harris, and I am the director of the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution. And I am pleased to be joined with Judge Brent Craig, who is a district court judge with the 8th Judicial Circuit in Morgan County. And Judge Craig also chairs the Administrative Office of Courts Technology Commission, along with Jimmy Walter, who is an attorney with Capel Howard and also a registered mediator and arbitrator here with the center. But Jimmy also chairs the Alabama Supreme Court Commission on Dispute Resolution. And so we welcome you today to our webinar on ADR Trends in Alabama. We are grateful to the center as well as to the dispute resolution section of the Alabama State Bar for sponsoring this free webinar. And I do want to let you know that this program is being recorded. And throughout the program, we will be monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat box. As I said, we will be monitoring the chat box throughout the next 60 minutes. After the program is over, you will be sent the slides from today's presentation, along with an evaluation link and SurveyMonkey. We value your feedback on this program. It's also a requirement that we make an evaluation available to you through the Alabama State Bar MCLE program. And the center will be posting the CLE credits no later than a week from today. So I want to make you aware of that. And again, welcome to our webinar. And as I said, we are now going to officially begin. This program is being recorded. So if you're just joining us, please mute your phones and turn your videos off. So we thought this would be a really important topic to talk about what's been going on with alternative dispute resolution, especially since the pandemic of 2020. And so today we're going to look at some trends. We also want to recognize that President Taz Shepard has designated April as ADR month, and so we are pleased to support that endeavor. And so we're going to talk briefly about what the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution does and who we work with and how we collaborate with other entities across the state. We're going to be talking about the statistics that we track regarding alternative dispute resolution. We'll talk about some recent changes within the last year or two to the Alabama Civil Court mediation rules. And then we'll shift our focus into looking at what the impact of the pandemic has had on mediation and some really great initiatives and pilot programs that are going on since 2020 with online dispute resolution. So to begin with, as I mentioned, my name's Eileen, and I have the privilege of serving as the executive director for the executive director for the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution. But in that capacity, I also serve as the secretary to the Alabama Supreme Court Commission on Dispute Resolution. And I wanted to share with you what our commission looks like. We are a diverse group, and we come from various appointment authorities throughout the state to oversee and monitor ADR. The Alabama Supreme Court Commission on Dispute Resolution was created back in 1994 by order of the Alabama Supreme Court. When the commission was formed, it decided that it needed an entity to handle the day-to-day administration for the commission. And so the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution was created in 1995. We are actually not a state agency. We were formed as a 501c3. But our tasks and responsibility are many. Our commission works with the courts, the Alabama State Bar, various organizations and companies, as you can see from the slide here. One of the important aspects is our commission has set criteria for training for mediators. And so if you visit the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution and you're interested in becoming a mediator, we have 2 providers of mediation training whose courses have been approved by the center to meet the roster registration requirements. Those are Mediations CLE as well as Alabama Mediation Training. The center and the commission have worked with the state agency conflict resolution group, as well as we belong to a national network of ADR providers and work closely with various state offices throughout the country, as well as the American Bar Association dispute resolution section, as well as court ODR programs and ADR programs. We also work with the law schools and various schools and universities in helping to promote and increase everyone's awareness on alternative dispute resolution. And our commission is formed of various committees that ensures standards for neutrals, as well as community outreach and education. And so you can see that we are working on peer-to-peer mediation in schools and helping to teach young people about conflict resolution. The mission of the Commission and the Center is to develop, implement, and administer and manage ADR programs in courts, neighborhoods, educational facilities, and government agencies within the state of Alabama. You can visit our website at alabamaadr.org. And on the website, you can learn more about what's available for judges, for mediators and arbitrators, for private judges, more about the center, about the commission, as well as the dispute resolution section of the Alabama State Bar. And then we have a section called for the public. And this is probably our most viewed area of the website that provides information to the public about mediation, arbitration, and private judging, as well as various programs that the center has available to assist the public. And then if you're an attorney or a neutral, you can visit the resources section on the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution website, where you'll find various information about the Code of Ethics, the Civil Court Mediation Rules, opinions issued by the Alabama Supreme Court Commission on Dispute Resolution. And so we like to view our website as the window to the world, for the world to access information about ADR in Alabama. So let's move in and talk about trends in Alabama's ADR programs. Jimmy, I think, would you like to talk about the court filings and what's been going on across the state?
All right. I'd be glad to, Eileen. Thank you. One overlying fact that we need to keep in mind as we go through the mediation and arbitration trends for the last 10 years or so is that in general, the number of court filings in Alabama has been decreasing over the last 10 to 12 years. And it's illustrated in the chart you have in front of you. In particular, the civil case filings have decreased statewide over the last 10, 11, 12 years. And there's also been a general decrease in domestic filings, although not quite as pronounced as the civil filings. If you go to the next slide, please. As far as our ADR trends for 2021 and in the preceding years, the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution monitors and publishes survey results that are provided by our registered neutrals on the center's roster. We receive and publish statistics and results as far as mediation, arbitration, and also by our private judges. The survey return rate for 2021 was 47%. So 47% of the registered neutrals completed the survey, provided the results to the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution. In the statistics that we're going to look at in a moment, you'll see that there's a correlation between our percentage on the survey return rate and the numbers of mediations and arbitrations that are shown on the results. Obviously, the fewer mediators who provide annual survey results will generally show a smaller number of mediations for the year, and the same with arbitrations. And then in years when we have, say, 50 or 60% of our mediators or arbitrators providing the survey results, we typically have higher numbers of reported mediations and arbitrations. Next slide, please, Eileen. This is the general slide for mediations 1997 through 2021. The basically 24, 25 years that we've been collecting and publishing these results. As you will see, back in 1997, when mediation was in its infancy in Alabama, there was a relatively low number of cases or mediations that were reported, although we did have a fairly large return rate that year. So the mediations have generally increased steadily up through the early 2000s. And then there was a drop and ebb and flow in mediations up until the last 2 years. And I'll explain a couple of reasons for that in a few minutes. As you see here, the number of cases that have been settled, of the cases that have been mediated, has historically been very high in Alabama. For example, 2021, 7,125 cases mediated, and that is just with 47% of registered mediators reporting their results. So there would have been significantly higher number of cases actually mediated in Alabama during 2021. And there was a reported settlement rate on those mediated cases of 86.5%, which is indicating that our mediators and the attorneys are doing a fine job of being able to work together to reach settlements in cases. The 86.5 settlement rate is a little bit higher than we typically see. The settlement rates in Alabama generally range from around 70% to around 86 or 88%. So Alabama mediators and attorneys have historically done a fine job in settling cases. As far as the substantial increase from 2019 to 2020 and 2021, there are a couple of reasons for that. The primary reason is that the Alabama Department of Labor Ombudsman Program registered 9 of their ombudsmans with the Center for Dispute Resolution during 2020. And those 9 ombudsmans mediated a large number of cases and reported those results to the center. So that is the primary reason for the spike in cases, both reported in 2020 and 2021. If we were to remove the number of cases that were reported by the Department of Labor Ombudsman, actually in 2020, there would have been a slight decrease in the number of mediations from 2019, which is still a good result given the impact of COVID-19 on 2020, that we were able to accomplish approximately as many mediations in 2020 as we did in 2019 through some creative practices. 2021, even removing the ombudsman survey results from the mediation figures, there was an increase in cases mediated, 661 more cases mediated in 2021 than in 2020. And I think the result for 2021 is likely that given the backlog of cases that has been accumulating in our courts since the beginning of COVID-19, I think judges are are sending cases to mediation as a result of those high caseloads and needing to get cases moving on their dockets. And also, I think private parties are becoming interested, even more interested in engaging in mediation in order to have cases resolved that may not be reached on the trial docket until sometime later this year, or maybe 2023. So there were a high number of mediations in 2021, and I think we're also going to see that 2022 is going to be a very busy year for mediators as well. Eileen, next slide, please. This slide shows the mediations for civil cases 2015 through 2021, excluding domestic relations cases. And as you can see here, there's been an ebb and flow in civil mediations over the last 6 years or so. Most of the cases are cases that the parties decide to go to mediation without the cases being court ordered, although the number of court ordered cases in each year has been approximately a third of the total number of cases that have gone to mediation. Again, there was an increase in civil mediations from 2020 to 2021, I believe because of the factors that I just mentioned. And I would expect that there's going to be even a larger increase of mediations in 2022 when those results are published this time next year. The settlement rate for 2021 was 75% on civil cases. Registered Alabama mediators devoted 931 hours pro bono to mediations, which is a great service both to our courts and to the public as well. Next slide, please. With respect to domestic relations, you see here that that there has been an increase in the number of domestic relations mediations pretty much every year from 2015 through 2021. Most of the domestic relations cases are court ordered. And also you see that there's a very good settlement rate for domestic relations cases. The settlement rate has varied from a low of 63% to a high of 79%, including this past year, 2021, 79% of domestic relations cases were settled, which again is a great benefit to the courts and particularly to the Alabama families and children who are involved in those domestic relations matters, that it's not required to go to trial. Domestic relations mediators devoted 414 hours pro bono during 2021, which again is a great benefit both to the bar and to the public. Next slide, please, Eileen. In addition, mediators continue to assist parties in settling cases pre-litigation without the need to file a complaint or to file a petition. As you'll see, there was a substantial increase from 2019 to 2020 and 2021. That goes back to what we previously discussed concerning the Alabama Department of Labor Ombudsman's program. Almost all of the cases that the Ombudsman handle are pre-litigation without there being a court filing. So those are all, for the most part, being reported as non-court mediation. But that was a substantial number of cases that were reported and settled. The settlement rate for non-court mediation during 2021 was 98%, which is terrific. And as you'll see, as far as pro bono hours are concerned, there were 3,494 pro bono hours reported this past year, which again is a terrific benefit by our mediators and all of the programs they've been involved in to help parties settle disputes without the need to go to court in order to have that done. Next slide, please, Eileen. We're going to turn now to the arbitration survey results. And like the mediation survey results, there's a high correlation between the number of arbitrations that are reported and the percentage of arbitrators who provide the survey results at the end of the year. The end of the year survey return rate for registered arbitrators ranged from a high of 85% in 2011 to a low of 35% in 2020. So you see that there's for example, in 2008, there is a large number of arbitrations that were reported, and there was a very high return rate. I believe 84% of the arbitrators returned their surveys that year. So I think that's largely indicative of the high number reported. The number of court-ordered arbitrations, as you will see over the years, is a relatively small percentage of the total number of arbitrations. Most of the arbitrations come to arbitrators to be decided through either the American Arbitration Association or other arbitration providers such as JAMS, rather than being court-ordered, although there are consistent numbers of court-ordered arbitrations that are reported every year. At the bottom of this chart, you'll see that the registered arbitrators has actually declined somewhat from 2008 to 2021. And at the present time, there are just over 50 registered arbitrators in Alabama based on the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution records. Next slide, please, Eileen. And this graph shows the types of arbitrations that were reported for 2021. And I guess in keeping with the Easter and spring theme, it's in a lot of nice pastel colors. But as this indicates, of the 57 registered arbitrators, there were 82 reported cases arbitrated. 13 of the cases were court-ordered, and the registered arbitrators provided 52 hours of pro bono time. There was a 42% survey return rate. Interestingly, most of the, or I should say approximately half of the arbitrations reported for 2021 were either consumer arbitrations. Slightly less than 25% of the arbitrations were consumer arbitrations, and commercial arbitrations accounted for approximately 21% of the arbitrations. So you'll see that there are a large variety of disputes that are arbitrated, but approximately half of those arbitrations are either consumer arbitrations or commercial arbitrations. Personal injury cases accounted for approximately 9% of the arbitrations, followed by contracts and nursing home arbitrations, which accounted for approximately 7 to 8% of the arbitrations. Next slide, please. With respect to private judging is a relatively new service that's being offered in Alabama. The legislature authorized private judging in 2012. There were some amendments to the Private Judging Act in 2018 in order to tweak a few things and to make it more accessible to different types of cases. Next slide, Eileen. At the current time, there are 18 registered private judges. These are, for the most part, retired judges, judges who are no longer active judges in the state. There were 19 cases in 2021 where the parties agreed upon a private judge to resolve their dispute. 19 of those cases tried, all of those cases tried. As far as the type of case is concerned, all of the cases, all 18 of the 19 were domestic relations matters. And I understand most of those were in Jefferson County. And there was one insurance case that was handled by a private judge at the request of the parties. I think we are likely to see in 2022 an increase in the number of cases where the parties decide to use a private judge, again, just because of the backlog of civil and domestic relations cases that the attorneys may want to agree upon a private judge in order to go ahead and get those disputes tried and resolved. Next slide, please. As far as the private judging comparison is concerned, 2017 through 2021, as you will see, the number of registered private judges has remained fairly constant. The number of cases that have been tried by private judges, there was 34 cases in 2017. Only 4 of those went to trial. And then there was a drop off in 2018 and 2019. And then after the amendments to the Private Judging Act, which allowed for additional types of cases to be eligible for private judges, the numbers increased again, where we had 28 cases that were handled by private judges in 2020. 26 of those actually had trials. And similarly, in 2021, there were 19 cases handled by private judges and 19 trials. So that in the last couple of years has become more active. And I think that's something, at least for this next year, where we might see at least the number of cases going to private judges that we saw in 2020 and 2021. Eileen, next slide, please. As far as appellate mediation is concerned, this slide shows you the general disposition percentages for cases that the Alabama Supreme Court actually decides. 70% of the Alabama Supreme Court decisions in civil cases are affirmances, approximately 19% are reversals, 9% are dismissed, and in a small 2% number of cases, there is some other decision or outcome in the case. And then as far as appellate mediation with the Alabama Supreme Court is concerned, for this past year, there were 61 cases that were mediated that originated from the Alabama Supreme Court. There were 44% of those cases in which a full settlement was reached. 1.6% of those cases, there was a partial settlement. So approximately 46% of the cases were either fully or partially settled in appellate mediation. And then it was reported that there was an impasse in 54% of the Supreme Court appellate mediations. Next slide, please, Eileen. With respect to the Alabama Court of Civil Appeals, the disposition rate as far as cases that are actually decided by the Court of Civil Appeals, 74% were affirmed in 2021. 9% were reversed. 3% were affirmed in part, reversed in part, and then 14% there was another disposition of those cases by the Court of Civil Appeals. Eileen, next slide, please. And then as far as the Court of Civil Appeals appellate mediation, the percentages are very similar to what we saw with the Alabama Supreme Court. Last year, it was reported that 45.6% of the Court of Civil Appeals mediations resulted in a full settlement. 1.1% resulted in a partial settlement. So again, approximately 46% of the Court of Civil Appeals appellate mediations resulted in either a full or partial settlement. And then 53% of the Court of Civil Appeals mediations resulted in an impasse, and then went to the Court of Civil Appeals for disposition. Next slide, please, Eileen. With respect to pro bono mediation, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, Alabama mediators just do a terrific job in providing their time on a pro bono basis to help the courts, various courts around the state with their dockets in resolving matters. Also help parties resolve matters short of mediation as well. And as you'll see, during 2021, Alabama mediators devoted 5,895.3 hours to pro bono mediation, and that would be valued at a general standard rate at over $1.1 million devoted on a pro bono basis by Alabama mediators. That includes not only helping out with pro bono district court mediations, also our law school clinical mediation programs, and then registered mediators and arbitrators in Alabama just devoted time on a pro bono basis that was reported to the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution. So that is a terrific benefit to the courts and to the public of the state of Alabama. And on behalf of the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution, I would like to thank all of you that devoted hours to pro bono mediation and arbitration this past year. Thank you. And Eileen, I think I'm going to turn it over to you at this point.
Well, thank you. Just for a minute or two, I just want to share with you some of the pro bono mediation opportunities that are available to the public in Alabama. We have several through grants. As I mentioned before, the center is organized as a 501c3, and we receive grant funding, and we have contracts. And so we're very grateful thanks to the Alabama Supreme Court and the Alabama Civil Justice Foundation to be able to help parties who are going through an initial divorce or initial CS case with by providing them with a free family mediator. We've been in 48 counties. There are some criteria to be able to be eligible for this. The family income must be less than $60,000. And we also ask our mediators to give pro bono service. And we've had really good success rate in 2021. We had 60 families enter the program. There was a settlement rate of 78%. The average family income was just under $40,000. And since this program began in 2013, 977 families have entered the program with an overall settlement rate of 77% and 7% reaching a partial agreement. We've had feedback from the courts that tell us that if the parties can reach an agreement, they're more likely to follow that. And even if they don't settle, that they're more civil when they come back to court and that the issues are typically more generally defined. We also have some foreclosure mediators trained. That program began in 2016, and we have funding thanks to the Alabama Law Foundation to be able to help homeowners in Alabama who are at risk of foreclosure. They can contact that volunteer lawyers program at the Alabama State Bar, who we partnered with, and they conduct an initial intake. There is an income eligibility criteria for that, and the Alabama State Bar's volunteer lawyer program does a great job of screening for that. And then we refer cases to our trained foreclosure mediators. We're real excited to have received 2 grants this year at the center to help landlords and tenants. We call this the Alabama First Landlord Tenant Mediation Program. That it can help landlords and tenants who are facing unlawful detainer problems, evictions, or any type of landlord tenant dispute in court. It is court ordered mediation, and $12,500 is awarded from the Alabama Civil Justice Foundation. We've targeted that for Jefferson County because Jefferson County accounted for the vast majority of the unlawful detainer and eviction cases since the pandemic. And then we're very grateful to the Alabama Law Foundation who awarded us a grant of $50,000. This is a statewide program for landlords and tenants, and there is no income eligibility criteria. So the judges were provided this information back in February. We provided training to the bar and to our neutrals. And so some of the courts are taking advantage of this to help landlords and tenants resolve their disputes. We did learn from a report that during the pandemic, 42% of Alabamians indicated that housing insecurity was the main concern. There are also some innovations going on with the pilot programs throughout the state with regard to mediation. There is a voluntary juvenile dependency and termination of parental rights mediation pilot program that is being administered by the Alabama Administrative Office of Courts. There are 16 specially trained volunteer mediators working on this program. This pilot program was authorized by the Alabama Supreme Court, and it will end in September of 2023. We've got 3 counties participating in this. We also are working with the Administrative Office of Courts for an access and visitation grant. We work with the Family Division of the Administrative Office of Courts and the Children's Policy Council, which selects agencies to participate. And the center is working with them because it does have mediation as a component. We've had really good success rate with that. In 2021, 69% of non-custodial fathers and 43% of non-custodial mothers reported increased access and visitation with their children, and that's the purpose of the grant. I just want to highlight in the next minute a little bit about the center's website, because I did tell you at the beginning that we do have resources available to you that you can reference. We have the majority of our publications and as well as CLE materials posted on the site, and our commission also issues in response to requests for ethics opinion. Our last ethics opinion was issued in 2021, so I'd invite you to check it out. And the rules for civil court mediation have remained fairly constant, except for we did have one change to the Alabama Civil Court Mediation Rules on April 1st of 2020 that talked about the qualifications of a mediator. And I'd invite you to read that as well as review the comments posed and that are recorded in the Civil Court Mediation Rules. We talk a little bit about what the pandemic and the impact it has had on mediation. and we've seen an increase in numbers. One of the things that we do ask our registered mediators and have asked them during the last 2 years is, how has the impact been on your practice? And this slide shows you that even though the pandemic was ongoing, 64% of our registered mediators, and I'm not including the ombuds because they're statewide and they do a lot of their mediations by telephone or by a web-based program, but the registered mediators indicated 64% of their mediations have continued in their office in person, with 16% done through a web-based program, and then 14% maybe through a hybrid of maybe one person's in their office or an attorney and a party are in their office, and the others attending by either telephone or a web-based program. Now, I think this is a good segue to transition into and introduce you to Judge Brent Craig, because he has really been at the forefront of working with the Technology Commission over at the Alabama Supreme Court or Administrative Office of Courts building, and working with the state bars task force on online dispute resolution. So Judge Craig, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, well, thank you, Eileen, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak about our online traffic resolution and then our new program, the ODR, we call online dispute resolution for small claims. I'll try to tell you a little bit about quickly how this got started. As mentioned, I chair the Technology Commission for AOC, or the Administrative Office of Courts, and if any of you are not attorneys, that is the we have a unified court system, and AOC is headquartered at the Supreme Court building, and they help oversee and provide services for all of our courts throughout the state. And one of the things we do is technology. And in May of 19, Chief Justice Tom Parker, the AOC Director Rich Hobson, we had some other judges on the Technology Commission, some people with the IT at AOC, and myself. We went up to this Court IT Initiative Summit in Louisville, Kentucky. And one of the things they were talking about there was online dispute resolution that's primarily in small claims court. It can be in other type courts, but you certainly want to start in small claims in terms of when you've got litigants on both sides. And so we had that meeting. We then met with our programmers. We have in-house programmers at AOC, and then out of AOC at OLIS does a whole lot of our programming, a company out of Mobile, and we began meeting with them. And initially we were going to do the ODR, online dispute resolution for small claims, but COVID hit, and at that time we had already been doing programming. We started in late summer, early fall of 19, but we decided to flip it over to OTR, online traffic resolution, because so many people couldn't get in the courthouse to even resolve their tickets, ask for driving school, things like that. And we thought it could impact or touch more people more quickly if we switched over to online traffic resolution. And if you want to skip over to the next couple of slides, we started that OTR in Morgan County. That's one advantage, I guess, of being the chair of the Technology Commission. I get to be the guinea pig when I want to be, and I'm kind of a nerd, I guess you could say, and I enjoy technology. So a lot of these programs we get to start in my county and in my court, and we started that in December of 2020, and then Tuscaloosa joined next. And as through the end of 21, we had around 17 to 18. Now we're in the 20s, with probably around a third of the counties now are using OTR. You can see in 2021, we had over 900 tickets that were disposed of. But if you'll go to the next slide, you can see, and this was just at the end of March, we were over 14,000. So you can see how it's getting exponentially larger as we add more counties. One of the things in our programming, we were careful to make sure that this online traffic resolution not only would work on a desktop, but it would also work on smartphones. And probably around approximately three-fourths of the people are using smartphones to dispose of their cases without ever having to go to the courthouse. The next slide is kind of hard to see because it didn't really capture, but most of them are speeding. But just quickly, I'll go, if you'll go to the next slide. This is when somebody gets a ticket in Alabama, there will be a little yellow sticky on there that tells them for the counties that have this available that they can go. They actually go to traffic.alicourt.gov is the initial landing page, but from there, that page tells them a little bit about it. And then they can click resolve, and it takes them to this page you see it on your screen here. And they enter their ticket number. They could enter their case number if they had one, but they enter their ticket number, date of birth, and year of birth, and that helps find the ticket. If somebody got one in a county that's not yet on board, it would tell them at this point that that's currently not available for your type ticket. Or let's say they got a ticket that it's, you know, we don't do DUIs, for example, on ODR or OTR. So it would reject them at that point. But from there, and if you'll go to the next slide, we capture some information from them, cell phone, email. And from this point on, we would be conferring with them via email when they make requests to the court. And if you'll go to the next slide, you can see the different options they have. They can plead guilty, pay their fine right now and be done with it. That was actually available before. And then the rest of these things are new. And B, and we get a lot of these, is where people say, hey, and it's just like previously they had to come to court and ask me for time to pay, which we always give people time to pay, but now they can do it online without ever having to go to the courthouse. So that's what B is when they're needing time to pay. And that's one of our largest requests. And then the other big one is C there. And that's where they're asking for driving school. And if you will go to the next slide, the other things listed there are just other things that people can do. They can, for example, if you had a broken tail light and you went and got it fixed and had a law officer sign off that you got it fixed, you can upload that proof to the system, and depending on how the court handles it, your case can be dismissed outright, or some say it's dismissed on payment of costs and things like that. But no driver's license, no insurance, things like that are other options. But far and away, the one we see the most, other than people asking for time to pay and just out and out pleading guilty, are people that are wanting to attend driving school. And that is option C. And if you'll see in the highlighted area there, and our example is Morgan County, every court will put on their website, every jurisdiction, what their requirements are. And if you can go to the next screen, I know the text is too small to see it, but this is kind of what it looks like. This is Morgan County's, and it sets out what their requirements are. And different counties have different requirements. We require in-person driving school, although it can be by Zoom. But you know, there are some of these, and many counties accept that online driving school where, you know, you watch something and answer questions periodically and things like that. But for our jurisdiction, we require in-person driving school. But if you go to the next slide, this just shows what people are picking the most often, and as previously discussed, A, where they just want to plead guilty and be done with it. Then C, driving school is the next most popular choice far and away, and then B, where they ask for time to pay. But the C and B, most of those in most jurisdictions, they couldn't do that online. They had to come in person, at least to the clerk's office, if not go to court itself. And you can see there it's over 6,000 cases that now people did not have to come to court. And then there are others that you can see there also. And it runs very smoothly from a judge standpoint. My judicial assistant monitors things for me, and I hardly have to get involved unless there's something kind of unique, and it's working well with our clerk's office as well. The Morgan County Circuit Clerk, Chris Priest, we have Zoom meetings on OTR every Thursday. We've been doing that for well over a year now. And he's been very helpful. He and his team have been very helpful. We've got other clerks on that too, but it's in terms of integration, it's working well. And that's the goal of Chief Justice Parker. He wants to make court accessible for people in an easier manner. And that kind of brings us back to the online dispute resolution for small claims court. If you want to go to the next slide. As many of you might imagine, in small claims, which I happen to do those too as a district judge, particularly defendants, I would say it's defendants is probably 90% or more pro se, and even plaintiffs. We have many plaintiffs that are pro se other than what you might call mass filers, credit card companies, and things like that. So having this system can be very helpful. Right now, we have a lot of default judgments. People will get served and they think, well, hey, I can't get off work to go to court. And they won't even file a response, or they may file a response and not show up for court. And although the plaintiff gets a judgment, as for those of your attorneys know, actually collecting that judgment can be time consuming, expensive, and difficult. And through this system, we are hoping to have a way where, number one, the defendant may be able to avoid a judgment being entered against them if they comply with an agreement. And then number two, for the plaintiff, it may be easier to collect on a judgment when the defendant responds. But this is where the defendant would go to, and we're actually live on this in Morgan County on a limited basis. We've met with some of essentially our top 10 filers, plaintiffs, and on those cases, the defendant, and we got approval with the Supreme Court to do all of this, by the way, but the defendant will get served with a piece of paper telling them, hey, if you want to participate in this program, you need to go to this website, which is odr.alicourt.gov is the domain for it. And it will take them to this spot here. We actually had a meeting last week. We're going to change the landing page to make it a little more user-friendly. Some of the defendants were having a little problem understanding, well, what if I haven't registered yet? And but hopefully we're making that a little more easy for people. But they go to this page here to sign in. The next slide just is a part of the page where they get served with when they get the summons and complaint telling them how they can be a part of this program. And the test complaint, we've got some screenshots of a test complaint, but or screenshots of how it works. And I'll try to touch on this very quickly. But one of our goals, as we said, was to try to make court more accessible. And one of our very first ones, like I said, we started this March 21st. People have to get served, of course, before it really gets rolling. And so we haven't had a lot just yet, but I think we've had maybe 4 settlements, I think, something like that. But one of them, the defendant filed his answer, which he can now, or she can do online, electronically, which will be a part of the court file. The settlement negotiations will not be a part of the court file. It's more like they're out in the hallway at court. I won't know what their settlement negotiations are, but the interesting thing was it was in that very first one we received, and that's kind of what we were shooting for, is that it settled. He filed his answer at 1 a.m. in the morning. Maybe worked late shift, I don't know, but it worked, and then the plaintiff sent something back. But and Elaine, I know does it cut off at an hour? Do I need to just kind of wrap things up, or what do we need to do here?
Judge Craig, it does not end in an hour. So if we go longer,
okay.
folks, you'll get more CLE credit. So this is such a great topic. I don't want it to be rushed, but if you can stay with us, folks, please do.
All right, well, that's good to know. I'll try not to be too long-winded, but I just want to be aware of the time there. Well, this is the screen that the the defendant, once he or she signs in, will come to. They first go register with the ALA file, and then they come back here. And if you're familiar with small claims answer forms, we already had paper forms that people could file. And in fact, it came with the summons and complaint, and it still comes with it. But this is the electronic, and you can see the things, the options that they can choose, but it tells them what they've been sued about, and it gives them instructions on what they want to do, and they can make that selection. Selection B down there, that's basically consent judgment, just like on the form, the paper form. I admit everything, I do not want a trial. But C is where is new. This is not something on a paper form where they're going to make a settlement offer to settle the case. And if you want to go to the next screen there. And in this example, the defendant makes a settlement offer of $300 total, and how he will make or she make payments. They couldn't make an offer of a one-time payment. In this case, it's multiple payments, and the program will calculate that for them. Once they enter the starting date, it calculates when it will begin and end. And if you'll go to the next slide, okay, after they hit that, it tells them this: you must wait for the plaintiff to respond. You'll also see near the bottom there, the ODR history. It's going to tell everything as things go back and forth, what is going on. Again, the judge sees none of this. This is just between the parties. And so I think the next screen goes to the plaintiff's response, I believe. Yes, this shows the plaintiff, hey, here's what the defendant is offered. The plaintiff can accept that offer or make a counter. In essence, it's a counter offer, although the way our system is set up, it's saying, I do not accept this offer, but I will agree to consider another offer. And then in the comment section, the plaintiff can list what she would be willing to accept. Instead of having offer, counter offer, we wanted the offers to always come from the defendant, and the plaintiff can say what he or he can accept it or say what he would consider. And just in terms of flow charting, it works more smoothly to do it that way. And you can go to the next slide. And okay, so the plaintiff said that he would take $350 in this example, and that's his screen. And then if we'll go to the next one, the defendant gets this where the defendant finds out what the plaintiff has responded, how he has responded, and then the defendant can make a new offer, or he can always say, at any time, either side can say, hey, I just want a trial. And the case is already docketed. In our jurisdiction, we set them out of around 5 to 6 weeks. So, and while I'm thinking about it, the defendant or plaintiff, you can see that respond by, there's a certain time to respond by. The system will give them reminders about that as that time approaches. It doesn't automatically end it, but it's just a reminder. And so far, I think we've had one where the plaintiff has not responded, but so far, most of this, one of them settled in a day, where we kind of have built in a 72-hour response time, but most are going back and forth fairly quickly. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and let's see, and go on to the next here. Yeah, there we go. Here, the defendant is making a new offer of, I'm going to make a one-time payment of $350. This is what the plaintiff had said he or she was willing to accept, and then you can go to the next slide. And it drafts a settlement agreement. These are very basic. And by the way, I didn't mention earlier here initially, anyway, because it's just cleaner, and particularly in small claims, we don't have a lot of multiple defendant cases. But right now, these are single plaintiffs versus single defendants. And you can see just a very simple agreement there, and then they will sign it electronically, which again, all of them can do this from their telephone or smartphone. And then the system will send that as a motion. That settlement agreement will be attached, and then that will go in what's called my motion queue. The judge's software in Alabama is called Alicourt Plus, and that will come to my queue. And you can go to the next slide. This is the agreement that will be attached to that motion. And then you can go to the next slide, but I will do an order accepting that agreement. And if it has a deadline, and we're still kind of working on the programming of this, I'm just manually keeping up with it. We have, and perhaps y'all have had cases that are placed on an admin docket. And if there are any people online that are not attorneys, that's kind of, as I tell litigants, that's kind of like a filing cabinet in the cloud that we just keep up with cases while things are going on. And so we have an ODR admin docket, which is set for that last payment date or 14 days after that. And if everything is done and completed and we've heard nothing else, the case would be dismissed at that point. And if the defendant complied with their agreement, there would be no judgment entered against the defendant. If the defendant failed to comply with the agreement, part of the agreement is, well, a consent judgment will be entered against you at that point, and the plaintiff can move for that consent judgment. At this point, we do not have a payment module for the ODR. That's something that we actually had already begun programming before we switched over to OTR, but it still got a lot of work to do, quite frankly. And then the other, and that's something we want to add, is the payment module, because that's going to help the plaintiff recover her judgment. The parties, even with the payment module, they could agree that they come pay to the plaintiff's office or whatever, but if they want to, they can pay through this payment module that we're going to develop, which should be convenient for both parties, and in particular for the plaintiff, because it'll help the plaintiff recover her judgment. But the other thing that which should be of interest to y'all is we want to develop and add mediators, or what some jurisdictions call facilitators, in the system. And we're going to be doing that. To be honest, we haven't fully decided we're going to add the payment module next, or the facilitator or mediator. Both is going to require a good bit of programming. And then we're still kind of working out the bugs, as we're a true test pilot program here in Morgan County. And it's not even all of my cases that we're doing, it's just a select number. But so far we're encouraged, because we are getting some settlements. Like I say, we've had 4, and it hasn't even been a month yet. And I'm really curious, as a judge presiding over these, is what impact is this going to have on our default judgments? We're thinking that it will reduce the default judgments, but of course we don't have statistics yet on that. But that pretty well covers it. And I know you may have questions about other portions of the presentation today, and then I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have about OTR and ODR today.
Thank you, Judge Craig. That was incredibly informative about the use of technology and how technology can be a tool to help litigants have increased access to justice. And as we've seen through the statistics, we've seen an increase in interest in alternative dispute resolution. And I think that through the use of online dispute resolution through the traffic program, as well as small claims, and who knows where this will eventually wind up and what greater impact this might have. But it definitely appears to have the opportunity to save litigants time and money with regards to time away from work and travel to court, and also to assist the courts with the backlog of cases. So that's pretty exciting. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat box. At this point, we don't have any questions, but if you would like to get in touch with our presenters today, we have their contact information available on the slide that you see before you. And I'm sure they'll be happy to entertain any questions that you have. And since there are no further questions, I'd like to again thank our presenters, Judge Craig and Jimmy Walter, for sharing your information with us about the statistics and what's going on across the state with alternative dispute resolution and some of the innovative practices. And ladies and gentlemen, again, the slides will be emailed to you, as well as your CLE credits will be posted by the center within a week. We would invite you again to complete the evaluation. In the email that you receive with your slides, you will have a link to SurveyMonkey, which will have the evaluation form. And we do value your feedback, and we'd also like to know what other topics you would like to learn more about. And thank you again for joining us. And
Eileen?
Yes.
I would just add, if anybody wants to email me, it's pretty easy. My email address is brent.craig@alicourt.gov, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions, or if you have comments or suggestions about our either OTR or ODR. But thanks again for the opportunity to share this today.
Oh, you're welcome. And I probably should have given y'all the opportunity for closing thoughts. So any closing thoughts that y'all would like to add?
Nothing on my end, Eileen, and thank you for making this available to us and organizing this. And I'd like to thank all of the people who've been online And I hope everyone will have a good afternoon, a good evening, and I wish all the mediators and arbitrators well.
Thank
Same
you.
here.
All right. Thank you all very much. And we do have one other webinar coming up on Thursday on best practices in arbitration. If you're interested in that, you can register by visiting the Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution's website at alabamaadr.org. We have the registration information there as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you everyone for attending.